Hello Sofa Squad. Today we are talking about a new Cringe Fest series. It is on Lifetime, so you already know the deal. It is called Cellmate Secrets. Now, there is like a few of these that came out. I think there's like 6 in this season or whatever. So specifically, I'm going to be speaking on 3 of them, but I'm going to do separate videos for each of them. So I'm going to be talking about Casey Anthony, which is today's video, Chris Watts one, as well as Susan Smith. Now, y'all, the cringe level on this is bad. You might need to get something to bite your damn lip or something on this one, y'all, because whoa. So before we get started, if you do like scary movies and horror movie reviews, be sure to check out my other channel, A Slice of Dice and a Spice Movie Reviews. You can see me talk about some of your favorite childhood movies there. Also, I want to give a shout out to the mods, the Patreons, the channel members, the subscribers, the people who watch, the people who comment, and the people who enjoy the Sofa Squad. It wouldn't be here without you. Thank you so much. If you want to consider joining the channel and seeing more content by me, things like story times, topics too hot to dish on the regular channel, and absurd criminals, then consider joining Patreon or channel membership. Now that being said, thank you once again to everybody, and let's get to dishing. Okay, so like I said, for this episode we're going to be reviewing the Casey Anthony episode on Cellmate Secrets. Now there are 3 main players in this episode. Obviously, Casey Anthony. Now there's another woman by the name of Robin who was also an inmate, and we'll talk a little bit about her backstory as well as her experience with Casey Anthony and what it seems to be like the protective custody unit at this jail. There's also another person involved. Her name's Sylvia. She was a former guard at this facility who worked directly with Casey, directly with Robin, and got herself thrown into this case by hook or crook. And so we're going to talk about that as well. Now, full disclosure going into this. Okay, so these 3 episodes that I've watched so far, Chris Watts, Susan Smith, Casey Anthony, there is a high level of cringe on this, but for this one, I really did feel like Sylvia as well as Robin were like legit people. The Chris Watts and the Susan Smith one, I was like, oh my God, this is like so bad. Obviously, the Casey Anthony person, her herself, I mean, she's horrible, and overall this confirms exactly pretty much what we already knew, but let's go ahead and talk about how we can now say that. So real quick refresher, remember Casey Anthony's daughter Kaylee went missing. So in 2008, Kaylee's grandmother, Casey's mother, is the one who reports her missing because obviously, as we know, Casey was being super shady. What ensued was a total circus that ended in Casey Anthony walking, I don't want to say scot-free, but damn near. She had to serve some probation for lying to police officers, but the biggest charges, the things that had to do with her poor little baby girl, she walked away free on those. So now if you've watched some of my other videos that I've done, you know, she was recently, Casey was in a barroom fight, and this doesn't surprise us. So Robin, this is the lady who was incarcerated with Casey. So Robin ended up having to do a 10-year sentence. She got thrown under the bus along with her husband. She'd only been married to him for a month. He was actually a police officer, and it turns out he was a dirty cop. He was doing like under the table drug deals. That's kind of like the department or whatever it was. He was one of those people, and he turned dirty. He was a dirty cop, and so he went down. He took her down with her. So right off the rip there, I honestly legitimately felt for Robin. I was like, you know what? I think she's legit. And even Sylvia, and I'll talk about this more later, the guard, when she was like talking about her experience being a guard at these facilities, she said she can usually tell really quickly who's real, who's not. And she said with Robin, she instantly knew like she's not supposed to be here type thing. The reason I bring that up right off the bat is because the story that Robin presented, I didn't get a vibe that there was any like fangirl stuff going on. I believed what Robin had to say. I considered her a sincere person. Now for those who have seen this, I'd be curious to see what you think about that. So Robin would say, you know what, I had never even considered being incarcerated, losing my family, all this stuff, and she got sentenced to 10 years. That's a really long time. And she was like, you know what, when that happened, that was the first that I had ever considered, you know, like ending it all. And she said, I was at the lowest point in my life. And she said, you know what? Yeah, I ended up considering Casey along the growth pattern or whatever you want to call it, like their friendship. She said, I considered her a friend along the way. She kind of like saved me from a really dark place. Now, one thing that comes into that is she didn't know who she was for a hot minute while she was incarcerated. So remember how I said earlier, Robin and Casey were in protective custody? So in this unit, it was like they each had their own little cell, whatever. Casey, the way she described it is, Casey, it was either one of them was on the top floor or one of them was on the bottom floor, but they were across from each other so they could see. So it was like this, and they could see each other's doors. And they started communicating like that. She said they would be doing things like, are you okay? Stuff like that. Very nonchalant, whatever. And again, remember, this was a case that it like slowly blew up until it was what we remember it as being this huge thing. So she's in protective custody. She doesn't really know what all is going on out there. She doesn't know who this girl is. So they're doing this whole thing, and she said, she would hear roommates like calling her, bad names, stuff like that. But she said, I didn't know what her story was. And so she was like, one day Casey's out, and she like signals her, and she's basically like, I wrote you a letter, and I'm putting it in this book. They have like a little library card or whatever. And she was like, so we picked this book that like, didn't look like a good book, basically is what it sounds like. And that's how they would pass notes back and forth. And so this ignites this friendship, if you will. Now, Robin does say, she's like, we both agreed that we would destroy these letters after we read them. And Robin was like, we really started divulging like a lot of personal stuff in these letters. And she was like, and I can understand this, where she says that when you're in there, you're so hungry for a human interaction, for anything like that. And she was like, so I started keeping the letters, because it was just something to read back over, so on and so forth. Now, she says in these letters that Casey starts talking about stuff like a certain kind of abuse from her brother and father, earlier in life. And then reflecting back on it, Robin's like, I almost wonder now if she was trying to test out her defense on me. And I think that's such a good observation, because 100% I'm like, oh yeah, absolutely. Casey Anthony, in my opinion, allegedly is absolutely nuts and has no feeling whatsoever, in my opinion. So I'm like, oh yeah, I'm sure she was doing that. She could not have been that stupid to think that this information wouldn't get back out there. So anyways, let's continue. Now, Robin says, the way that we kept these like on the down low or disguise or whatever is we use nicknames for everybody. And she was like, my nickname was Cookie and hers was Muffin. And I'm like, that is just so cute. Robin does say that eventually she learns why Casey Anthony is in jail through her father, because she's on the phone with him and she's talking about this like pen pal, if you will, and she says her name and her dad's like, oh whoa, like, girl, stay away, you need to be careful. Well, Robin says this, she's like, at this point we had grown like so close, if you will. They had divulged all this stuff to each other, and she was like, I felt like I was wrongfully being held. I have very limited information. And she's like, I gave her the benefit of the doubt at that point, because basically I'm looking at it like, if they threw me in here, my God, they'll throw anyone in there, because she never really did anything wrong. Robin had only learned about this thing that her husband was doing like days before he got busted. So she's like, I wasn't even involved in this whole scenario, this whole drug thing. She's like, who am I to say that Casey wasn't innocent? I mean, I don't know at this point. Now, when it comes to the actual, like, say, a physical, intimate relationship, that type thing, I mean, she said, and they showed some of the things where it was like, oh, I love you, and things like that. But she said, what, my mind was so over here on so many other things. I wasn't thinking of the loss of any kind of intimacy with somebody. I was more concerned about losing my children, my freedoms, those type things. I mean, basically like hooking up with some chick was the last thing on her mind. It would probably be next to impossible to do in the situation they were in. But that being said, all of that stuff, the red flags start to pop up in this, letter writing relationship. Now, one thing that Robin said that I thought was interesting is she said, yeah, Casey would like say that she was innocent, but it would be in a legal way. It wouldn't be like, as like one of, say, a person who didn't do that to their child would be like, I can't believe I didn't do this, did I? It would be more like, this is a circumstantial case. This is a case of speculation. It wasn't like Robin, who she had this authentic outraged, like, oh, hold on. I've been married to my husband for a month. I found out a couple of days before that, okay, life is getting ready to fall apart because he has a secret life, and I'm in here for 10 years. You know, she was like, that wasn't the vibe with Casey at all. Now, she also brings up a couple of things that, like, she was talking about with the specific incident with Kaylee. And, like, for example, in one of the letters she was talking or writing, Casey Anthony was writing, and basically explaining, like, look, you know, I was trying to get our stuff together and do all this so that we can move, and then Zanny the nanny took her, and it was like this wrench and everything, and so I was still just trying to get all my stuff together so that we could leave town, and that's why I never reported her missing. You know, and of course Robin, like, all of us, including Casey's mother, is like, wait, what? You know, it doesn't make any sense. And actually, to see how manipulative Casey is, I'm surprised she ever even went with that, because anyone that has a child or a pet at that matter knows if your kid goes missing, your answer isn't, oh, well, I knew Zanny the nanny had her, and even though she wasn't calling me back, you know, it was okay. I just wasn't going to report her missing. I'm like, no. That is no. So she was like, huge red flag went up at this point. Like, wait a minute. You know, I've been giving this girl the benefit of the doubt, but what's up? Now, another thing that she said is that she never got this vibe that Casey was, like, worried about the whereabouts of where her daughter was. And so one example she cited, she was like, you know what, we got an hour for a wreck, whatever it was. And she was like, I was watching TV, and the guard was, like, late coming to get her. And she's like, so I saw a few minutes of this news, and they had basically found this location where they had found some bones and some baby toys or something like that. We all know now that wasn't her, Casey's daughter, but at that time they didn't know that. So there was this whole level of, maybe that's that. And she said when she returned and everything, and she was able to communicate with Casey, and she told her this, and Casey was like, no, that's not my daughter. They're not looking in the right spot. That's not her. Almost like she knew that wasn't her. But however, when the remains were found, that's also another very telling piece of the puzzle. So Robin's like, yeah, when the remains were found, she definitely reacted, but it wasn't like a, oh my God, you know, my baby, my child. It was more of like a, they found her type thing. And Sylvia, remember the guard I told you about? We're going to talk more about her part of this or whatever. But in her retelling of the story, she said, oh yeah, when they found the remains, I mean, Casey had a straight up anxiety attack, but it was totally like a, oh my God, I just got caught anxiety attack, not my daughter is officially passed. So around this time, somewhere in the mix, it starts to come to light that Robin and Casey have been communicating all this stuff. Now remember, they're in protective custody and they're not supposed to have any interaction at all. And we'll get to the part in a minute again about how Sylvia got involved in this, but at times Sylvia was allowing them to communicate to each other. So, which I personally think helped the state's case, but not enough obviously. But anyways, so this all comes to light. So detectives are like, well, we want to know what she knows. And so they're interviewing her and stuff like that. And she said something to the effect of, you know what, all I knew is that the baby was found in a laundry bag in a Winnie the Pooh blanket. Well, it turns out that the detective was like, we haven't released any of that information to the public. So there's that. Now, on that note, it does make me wonder, well, why wasn't that brought up? And we'll get to how Robin was, you know, shipped back to Orlando from prison to stand by to possibly testify all this information. But nonetheless, I mean, y'all, so if I sidebar this for a second, y'all, we didn't need to hear all this from them to know what went down for the most part. This just confirms it, okay? Again, I don't have any reason to disbelieve Robin. I get an authentic vibe from her. I get an authentic vibe from Sylvia. You know, I'm not getting some vibe that they were fangirls or whatever. I mean, I legitimately think this is probably how this went down. And this whole realization of, you know, whoa, this chick, you know, totally did this to her daughter. Obviously, at this point, when Robin's learning this from the detectives, that all this stuff, you know, she's like, okay, yeah, this is not girl guilty, okay? So remember, Robin's going to be getting transferred off to the feds. So like right before this happens, like the night before, whatever, she was like, you know what? I went in to say my goodbyes to her and was basically like, look, I gotta know, Did you have anything to do with this? And she was like, Casey paused and just stared at me with that blank look, and then like held my hand and just shook her head no. And she was like, you know what? I didn't believe her at that point anymore, and I never talked to her again after that. And then she went on her way. Mind you, she wasn't done with Casey at that point, though. So let's talk about Sylvia, the corrections officer. So remember, like I said, Sylvia was drawn into this too. Now, Sylvia would say, you know what? Casey was like a celebrity. She was like, she got tons of mail, marriage proposals, letters, you name it. You name it, this girl was getting it. I mean, she was popping off in the press, and men were pursuing her, which I just find baffling. So one thing that was interesting is when the topic of Jose Baez was brought up to both Sylvia and Robin, they each were like, yeah, that was way more friendly of a relationship. There was something going on there. Now, it's never been proven, all that's allegedly. You know, it's never been proven that Jose and her had any kind of thing going on. But Sylvia would say, you know what, when I would be like, Casey, you know, get ready, you got a lawyer visit. She was like, Casey would bounce around, light up, she'd get all dolled up. You know, it was just a little bit more friendly than it probably should have been. Now, Sylvia does recount how she's like, yeah, you know what? It was policy. We were not supposed to let inmates talk to each other, all that. And one day, like, Robin was on the way to the showers, maybe, or something. And she basically was like, can I talk to Casey real quick or something? And she let her do it. And she was just like, you know what? I just didn't see any harm in it. You know, I let them talk. I know I shouldn't have. It is what it is. And it, you know, cost her a job eventually. And what would happen with Robin's job is after all this kind of took place and Robin goes her own way and all this kind of stuff, another inmate, someone completely different from Casey and Robin, basically tells on them all. And it's like, look, this is what's been going on. So all of this information comes to light. Well, these detectives and whatnot go to Robin and they're like, look, you know, if you don't come forward and give us these letters that you have and all this kind of information and tell us who the officer was, we're going to hit you with more time. And so Robin's like, I'm trying to get home to my kids. I had to, you know, I couldn't not. Now, this will cause Sylvia to be fired. And this, I mean, this was in the headlines. This was everywhere. This was major. Now, what would end up happening is Sylvia would come back and end up like talking with the police chief or the chief of police, whoever, the chief of the jail system, whatever his name is. And he was basically like, this is ridiculous. You know, do you want your job back? And she was like, nope. You know what? I want to go into law enforcement, but just switch my termination to a resignation and I'm all good. You know, I'm good. And that's what they did. And they said, you know what? You can always come back here if you want to work or whatever. So she did that and that worked out for her. Now, Robin, and I just feel like, well, damn, they did her dirty on this. They didn't give her any time off her sentence, nothing for the information she gave. And she had to serve her whole sentence. Now, they did ship her back to Orlando from the feds or whatever to stand trial, or not stand trial, to, you know, be on tap in case they needed to call her as a witness in Casey's trial. And she was there for like 3 months. And she said, you know what? It never happened, though. I never had to, you know, thank God, I'm sure. One thing that was interesting is Sylvia and Robin reunite towards the end of this or whatever, and it's nice and it's cool, and I mean it was nice seeing that full circle. And so then they're talking about the case, like, well, what do you think happened? And this was such a pivotal point because I felt like both of their opinions represent what so many people felt. Robin said she felt like what happened to Kaylee was not intentional by Casey, like it was an accident, but the covering up and the hiding the body and all that was totally intentional, that type thing. A lot of people felt that way. Okay, I was of that camp for the longest time. I used to think, you know what, I think she wanted to go out and party, she would slip Kaylee something and it was too much and something happened, whatever. The guard was thinking something different, and I was like, you know what, honestly, after watching this, I'm like, I think I agree with the guard now. The guard said, no, I think that what she did to Kaylee was intentional, and obviously hiding the body was intentional too. And she said that, you know what, her mom was always down her throat. Casey wanted to be out partying. She was a party girl. She knew how much her mother loved, her parents loved, you know, her daughter, Kaylee, and it was almost like a getting back at them type way, and obviously getting rid of the responsibility. And I was just just like, you know what? I do think that she is completely that soulless. I think that the brain doesn't ever want to really think that somebody would do that to their own kid, let alone another human, but especially their child, especially the mother and the child, you know what I mean? And so at this point, though, I'm just like, no, it's very possible people do that, and it's hard to accept that. And I could 100% see Casey being just the type of person that's like, yeah, I'm going to get back at my mother, and I want to party, and this child is in the way. So here we go. So of the 3 shows that I watched, like I said, this is the one that I was like, interesting. Y'all, the other 2 are complete you-know-what shows. I mean, I was just like cringing through the whole thing. So again, if you watch this, let me know what you think in the comments. If you didn't watch it, let me know. Are you of the camp that you thought, first of all, do you think Casey did it? Because technically, allegedly, she was found not guilty of this, okay? So there's that. Do you think she's innocent of that charge? If you don't think she's innocent, do you think that it was intentional or not intentional, the act against Kaylee? Obviously, whoever did this hid the body very close to the parents' home. Coincidental? I think not. Anyways, that's it for today's video. Thank you again to everybody for making the Sofa Squad the place to be. Okay. Now, on that note, I am going to go mosey along and finish my day. And until the next time, I'll talk to you then.